Now, I don't know about you, but here in the States, I always thought that having a mentor meant you already figured out what you wanted to be. And then you sought that person who was a great success and you begged them to teach you what they did to get where they are today. But after this interview, you'll find that a mentor is someone that you actually should have when you don't have it figured out yet. So join me outside the box as we talk with Stephen Shortt, author, speaker, and entrepreneur, who has a new take on the future of work. Enjoy. Well, thank you so much, Stephen Shortt, for joining me today. Thank you for your energy and your patience. We've had some technical difficulties, but we're making it happen. And I really appreciate your commitment and your patience on this. So first off, thank you for joining Outside the Box podcast, where we seek out wisdom and investigate insights that could change people's life. To start, I would like for you to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Perfect. Well, Wanda, thanks very much for having me on the show. As we said before you started recording, you're at the beginning of your day. I'm at the end of my day. So I'm in Dublin in Ireland. So it's been the end of a pretty busy week. So as I said, I'm in Dublin in Ireland. I'm a second generation entrepreneur. I've grown up in two family businesses. I bought both of those businesses and I sold one. Part of the reason for selling that one business is at the time I was going through a lot of work on figuring out my why, figuring out what I wanted to be spending my time doing. And I was starting to realize that business, that industry just wasn't exciting me anymore. It wasn't filling me with the passion that it once did. And now as I evolve this over time for the last couple of years, I've been very, very clear because I spent a lot of time really figuring out what I wanted to spend my time doing. And across all of our businesses and in my personal life, I'm on a mission to make the world a better place with happy people in fulfilling, rewarding careers. So we focus on the career side of things and helping people spend their professional lives in a fulfilling and rewarding way. We do that on the individual side by helping people identify their ideal careers, figuring out what it is that they're best suited for based on their unique mix of interests and abilities. And we also do career skills training to help people to develop and become the best versions of themselves. On the other side of that, we also do personality profiling and selection and coaching for companies to be able to identify and select and develop the ideal candidates for their roles and for their positions to make sure that they are being able to provide those careers. And through all of that, we've also started this new initiative called the Happy People Project, where we want to help people and companies to live their lives by design, to be able to figure out what it is that makes them happy and what they want to spend their time doing. And we've built this framework around identifying what happiness means for you and how to go about getting that.
Wow. So that sounds revolutionary on that system. Congratulations figuring that out. So I want to go back to when you were little. So your mother and your father both had a business. And when you reached the age of 18 or at some point, they were saying, I want you to take over the business. Was that two different businesses or was that the same business or?
So they both set up, they set up one business in 1982, 83, something like that, which was the current business, which is psychometrics, personality profiling, career guidance, selection, that kind of thing. And then we also distribute a number of assessments for international publishers in Ireland for speech and language therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, things like that.
Okay.
Then they also set up then an English language school, and they set it up together, so very much a partnership. And they set it up together to teach English as a foreign language in ESL school. That's where I spent most of my younger time. So as a teenager, I was working there, started running the summer camp, working in the summer camps, then running the summer camps, then doing the marketing, doing a lot of the travel, meeting a lot of the clients, and then ultimately taking over the business. I was probably in my 30s by the time I was really looking to take that over and actually buy them out. There came a day when my wife was pregnant with our second child that I came home one day and I'd been arguing with my folks so much about the different courses, the different things that we should be doing and providing, that when I sat down at my kitchen table completely exhausted and emotionally drained and just said out loud, I'm going to have to leave the family business because if I don't, my parents will never be able to see their grandkids because we won't be able to be in the same room as each other.
Wow.
And my body viscerally reacted to that when I verbalized it, when I actually said it out loud. And that's when I went on this process of figuring out, now this is the last thing I want. How do I avoid this So I started interviewing people, I started researching, I started doing the work, and I built the framework called Successful Succession to help family businesses to scale through the generations. And now, 15 years on, successfully bought out both businesses, sold one, still working with my parents, and we're all actually living in the same house now in a multi-generational house. We renovated my family home. We live upstairs and they live downstairs.
Wow. Sounds like you came in as a revolutionary. I think it's interesting that your parents actually were doing something similar to what you're doing. It's just that it wasn't working for you. So you had to kind of take a step back and do your own analysis of yourself and how you work as an entrepreneur.
It's not necessarily that we were doing the same thing. I mean, all companies have to evolve. The average lifespan of a business is about 20 to 25 years. We're already 30 years and plus in the making. But businesses have to pivot. You have to pivot your purpose at different points in your career, because the old phrase of what got you here is not going to get them there. And the number of businesses that don't make it through to second generation is not necessarily because of the quality or the abilities of the next generation. It's because there's a lot of stuff that is entrenched and difficult or impossible to change, or there's too much effort to change it, or not enough runway to be able to change it properly. So there's an awful lot of nuance that goes into this. So really, it wasn't that I was radically shifting the company. It's just I had a different, longer term vision than my parents, because as current generation people, they're more risk averse and they have maybe a slightly shorter horizon on what they see as the business, whereas the next generation should be having a much longer horizon.
So was your mission statement, behind the business, your why, how different was that from your parents to you?
So it's funny, when I finished college, early 20s, I went to New York and I did an internship and I worked in in the same industry in a different business in New York. And I came back and I actually have in one of my folders here in my office still to this day, the agenda for the first meeting that I had coming back in as the marketing executive, like the lowest possible rung I could have been on the family business, sitting down with my parents and the senior leadership team of the school at that point. And the first question that I was asking is, why do we do what we do? There's a million and one ways to make money in this world, both legal and otherwise. Why are we choosing to spend our time doing this thing? And it wasn't something that was really clearly defined. It was, my parents knew that they enjoyed the concept of teaching English. They enjoyed the concept of education, but there wasn't a real kind of demonstrable, tangible, why are we doing this in this way, other than we wanted to make sure it was high quality. It was more my journey of wanting to have more of a reason than just making money to be spending time doing this thing.
Yeah, certainly. And it's totally different perspectives. Yeah, there's a big difference in mindset, and also, the why with the economies. I mean, I know you're in Dumpling, but I feel like all around the world we've been evolving together. And it is interesting to, come into these businesses where the older generation are starting to, they're in their groove, they're in their routine, and they're just like, yeah, just learn this and do this. Whereas now there's so many possibilities that we are the ones that are showing them how to use technology, for example. Like, hey, we can build this program and we can use technology to make the business better. So it sounds like you were kind of the prodigy almost to them. They're like, great, we have this son and he's innovative and we're gonna, yeah. So that's amazing. I would be super proud of you to have you as a son, I would think. One of the things that I wanted to ask about as far as your why, you said your wife was pregnant with your second child and you came home and you had been spending no time with her, right?
Oh no, I had been spending time with her. I mean,
but you weren't happy.
I was happy, but I was completely burnt out from work because I wasn't arguing with my wife. I was arguing with my parents about the different courses and whether we should be getting interactive whiteboards or whether we should be moving premises or whether we should be upgrading our whatever. So it was all focused on my vision for the business.
Wow. Okay. Because that's something that a lot of us go through, especially in this time if we're trying to start a business or we're taking over a business. And, we're trying to follow in the footsteps of people who don't live in this current world, really. I mean, they live here, but they're not, trying to make a world for themselves. So the why is just like the most important thing. And that's the same thing with me with this podcast, right? It's like, well, it's going to take this time, but what's my why? Is my why strong enough? Can you kind of explain a little bit about that journey when you first were like, okay, I have to figure out my why and what I want? What was the first couple of things that you did?
So I told you about the meeting when I came back from New York. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out and actually talking to people within the business and in the industry, trying to understand like why, I mean, everyone's working really hard. Everyone's doing a good job, but why are they doing this? Why are they in marketing? Why are they in finance? Why are they in teaching? Why did they join the family business? Whatever. And I remember the first time I saw the Simon Sinek Start With Why, and I remember it being almost like an unlock of an idea. And then I started to explore this why. What's the rationale? Why do we do this? I then started working with a mentor who I had recently started working with, and I really went through a lot of the Simon Sinek stuff. I went through the book and the process. Some of it, my thing with a lot of business books is a lot of them are quite thick and chunky. I get the concepts, but I think sometimes the books feel that they need, or the authors feel that they need to drive home the points more and more. I get the concept, move on. So I worked through a lot of that. And then with my mentor, started really explaining my thought process. He was being very devil's advocate and pushing back and helping me to really strengthen my thinking and understanding my processes. One of the things that he did say to me, which I found interesting, before I decided fully to sell the business, he told me that I was trying to shoehorn in what I was already doing into this why, as opposed to really understanding what I wanted to be doing.
Wow.
And I suppose when I started to have that realization that, yeah, this is what I want to be spending my time doing, but the current business, the current setup is not.
It's not
feeding
fitting into
anymore.
that.
It did, but as the business evolved and as the industry evolved, it was moving in a different direction to what I wanted. And that makes perfect sense over time as well. Then that's when I decided that it was better to look after the team, sell to a growing organization so that everyone kept their jobs and all the rest of it. And then I was free to go and explore the things that made me more passionate.
So it sounds like you took your pain point, right? The things you were struggling with, and you actually made that into a business. At what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to have this business based upon the things I've went through, and it looks sort of like what they were doing, but it's not the same thing. At what point did you decide, okay, actually, I just need to take everything I've been studying, I've been learning, and make that into a business?
So part of it, the very first version of my why, the very first iteration when I was working through some of this is I knew I didn't want to make widgets. I didn't want to make physical stuff. I didn't want to be in production manufacturing. It wasn't something that appealed to me. I wanted to be helping people, but I wanted to help people to help themselves. I wanted to provide training or coaching or mindset shifting or something that I wasn't doing stuff for that person, but I was either building some kind of a framework or building something, some kind of a course or methodology or something that people could then implement for themselves. That was something that I felt was a better fit for me rather than one-to-one coaching or teaching in a classroom or something like that. I wanted to have maybe a bigger impact or not to be doing time for money, to free myself to be able to do different things in different places. Like I've done podcasts when I'm traveling from around the world, and I have a couple of things that I have in my travel setup where I can do a podcast from anywhere. So that was something that was very appealing to me. So what I started to do then was productize some of the services that we had for the career guidance, and we've built our own career guidance platform, Career Fit. Anybody can go on, do a series of assessments, and they can get a personalized report of shortlist of highly targeted careers, and that's key to what we want to do. And then in the future, we'll be helping them with kind of video on demand training courses to be able to upskill themselves, to be able to get the different skills that they will need for their career, to be able to help them to find fulfilling, rewarding careers. The Happy People Project really came from a period in my life about nearly 2 years ago, a year and a half to 2 years ago, when I was really down. I felt stuck. I was spinning my wheels. I wasn't making the progress that I wanted to make. And I started researching and reading and looking into this concept of happiness. And then I created this framework of happy being an acronym, HAPPY. So H is your highlights, A is appreciation. The first P is for progress. What are the habits that you want to develop? And then the second P is for people. Who are the people that you want to stay connected with, and who are the people that you admire? And then why is your contribution? What do you want to put out into the world? And if you can spend some time thinking about those different buckets of your life and finding the throughput, then you create a map, which is a measurable action plan to help you make progress towards purpose. So you identify the different purposes, not necessarily your life mission kind of overall purpose, but what are the things that you want to accomplish? And then how can you make progress towards that purpose? That's again born out of a period in my life when I felt a little bit adrift and not making progress.
I love that. I love that. And it sounds like you really niche down, not just assess someone at one particular moment in their life and then go after a career and then that be it. It sounded like you sort of observed and realized that, people change, things change. How do I successfully change from one thing to another and still be happy? And being able to help people like change things on their own, it's kind of like if you give them the tools to be able to change on their own, then you can show them once and then they can apply that themselves and continue forward. So I really love that. And I would be interested as far as this program, Happy People. I think that's the best thing that anybody could ever do. And I'm so happy that you had that experience in your life so that you could bring this forth in this generation. We are definitely quite aware, are we not? We change a lot.
I think change is the only thing which is consistent.
Yeah.
And if you're not changing and growing, things get stagnant, and that's when we start to get apathy and inertia, and then we start to get stuck, and we get stuck in a rut because we're not curious. Personally,
Yeah.
I think curiosity is the most important trait that we have as
Certainly, yes. I am a big believer in that. I've actually done a lot of things. I've had a lot of titles: a real estate agent, a nurse, an insurance adjuster, designer, you name it. I've been it. And so I'll meet people in all these fields and I'll be successful. And then something will happen and I'll realize I want to work for myself. And, it keeps coming back around to that. But all of the skills I gained in all of those areas, they help me now. And so when people call me, I'm realizing that honestly, you could use the same thing for everyone, which is curiosity. What are you curious about? You've got to be curious about something. And if you can grab that and hold on to it and keep finding your curiosity to it, you're going to start evolving and it can go wherever it's meant to go. But I agree, curiosity is the number one fundamental thing for us to continue to evolve as humans. So, wow, that's so awesome. So now that we understand your why, and again, I'd like to thank you. I really appreciate your why and that you're here in this world. Appreciate that. So for now, I want to ask a few questions here. So for someone wanting a career change, what's the best way to figure out their current skills and what new ones that they might need?
So in all careers, in all industries, AI is going to have an impact. But AI can't do the emotional stuff. It can't do the EQ stuff. So I would always encourage people. And again, it comes back to curiosity, like being curious about the people around you, being curious about what's happening, but developing that EQ, developing the ability to connect with other people, the ability to understand those nuances, and talk to people and listen to people and tell stories. All of this is going to be relevant in pretty much every industry. I mean, people talk about physics or engineering or kind of the real hard sciencey stuff, industries. There is still going to be a need to work with other people. There's still going to be a need to understand what your colleagues are doing or why they're behaving in a certain way at a certain time. So all of this is going to be really, really important. I love your story of having a huge amount of diverse experience. I have a concept called having a spectrum of skills. And I think if we have a spectrum of skills, we're far more likely to be successful and far more likely to be resilient against change. And there's a constant change happening in the market as well. If you're laser focused, then technology or industry or something can come and completely wipe you out. Whereas if you have a spectrum of skills, you're able to move between different things and use different traits and different skill sets in different environments. So it makes you far more robust and resilient.
Yeah. So it sounds like the first thing is that you just run over their abilities and skills as far as just basic communication. Are they the kind of person that can interact with someone? Are they not? Are they meant to be a loner? You made your own personality test to kind of figure out where they are on these levels?
Yeah. So I want to just touch on the difference between skills and traits, for example. So skills, for me, I have a company called Talent Select. It's what we do when we're helping companies to select the right talent. But to me, talent is just focused interest. Everybody, 80% of people can do 80% of the jobs. From a technical and ability point of view, they might be able to do it. They have some aptitudes that make it easier for them to do different things. But really, talent comes from focused interest. If you're interested in doing something, you will learn how to do more of it. So the reason why I think most people hate their jobs is actually because they're in the wrong job for them. They're just not interested in it anymore. They don't have that drive. They don't have that desire. There was a reason that they got involved in it. Sometimes it's well-meaning advice of, you were good at this in school, you should then pursue it as a career. Well-meaning, terrible advice. Or there are people that are gone, your father did this or your mother did this, so you should follow in their footsteps. Well-meaning, terrible advice. So really what I'm interested in is helping people to figure out what are they interested in and what are they naturally good at, and then merging that with the demand. If you imagine 3 different circles that intersect, interest, ability, and demand. If you have the interest and the ability, but there's no demand, that's a hobby. If you have the ability and demand, but you're not interested in it, that's a job. If you have the interest in it and there is demand for it, but you're not very good at it, you don't have the ability, that's a dream. So people who want to be movie stars or rock stars or whatever, and they just don't have the natural ability to be able to sing well or to be able to play the guitar or whatever, this is a dream. Now, in all 3 of these, you can get the other circle. So when you have a job, you might develop an interest in that job, and then it can become a great career for you. You might have a really powerful, a really interesting hobby and a really passionate hobby. And now it has never been easier to start turning those hobbies into careers, because it's never been easier to find people that have a demand for what you're interested in. But what I'm interested in and what I think people are best served in is understanding what are they interested in, what are they able to do, and where is the demand, and where those 3 circles intersect, that's your ideal.
And I'm thinking of motivation as well, because I also have found, and I had to learn this about myself in trial and error type of situation.
Best way to learn anything.
Yeah, but it's like I didn't know that I was going to enjoy something until I started physically doing it. Like, there are a couple of things where I would have never thought, okay, I really like doing this. And then when I started doing it, like for instance, riding my bike on a bike trail, I like to work out a lot. And, it just seemed like, well, I'll just keep working out. Like, that's the same kind of thing. Like, I don't really know how that's going to be any different. And so I just was really open one day, and I was like, I'm going to try something different. It was just like, I want to just try something different I've never done. So I got a bike and I went on bike trail, and I realized, like, I actually really like this, but I didn't even think that I would like it at first until I did it. So there's something to be said about acting first and finding motivation after. So you have that element as well, right? So you also mentioned that you will also connect with companies and make sure that they have the correct description of what they're looking for. And do you have put a person through a little bit of like a simulation where it's like, this is what your job's going to be doing, and this person's like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. Do you have a way of them like sort of practicing that physically so that they can kind of see whether that's something that they would like to do?
So we don't do that. What we do is we have 40 years of experience in matching people and careers. So we know what's involved in the jobs, and we know what kinds of interests people need to have in order to do well in those careers. So what we have is our interest inventory that we've developed is actual representation of the role. So we don't ask, would you like to teach young children? As an obvious thing of, would you like to be a teacher? One of the questions that we would have is, if you spent most of your day teaching people how to read and write, would you enjoy that? Or how would you feel about enjoying that? And the way that people respond to that versus the way that other people respond to it, as we've been doing these assessments for 40 years, tells us, okay, this person they might be a good teacher, but that gives us a whole area of careers. But then we have a follow-up question later on about teenagers, adults, or kids, and then that might move us more towards coaching, or more towards primary school, or more towards vocational stuff. The best feeling that I ever get when I'm talking to clients about their career guidance and their career fit report is two. One, where they go, "That's amazing. I had an idea, but this is actually a really specific niche within that idea. I absolutely love that, and that's what I want to do." But
Wow.
the best feeling that we get, and we get it all the time, is when a student is reading down, or a person is reading down through their report, and they're looking at the careers, and they read one of the careers and they go, "What the hell is that? I've never heard of that. I didn't know that was a career. That sounds amazing." And then they go off into a path that they had never even imagined was possible for them. But when they read the description, and the description is an actual description of the role, again, not a romanticized version of it, for the right people, that is going to resonate, and they're going to go, "Oh my God, that's what I want to do for the next 10 years."
Wow.
And we get that all the time.
Awesome. That sounds like something that I could probably use. I don't know. Good luck trying to figure me out.
Well, the other point that you made, and I love the one about that you need to physically do something. Again, when I tell people, if they're not sure, and target confusion has never been higher in people looking for careers. It has never been easier to have a career and make a decent living doing something you enjoy doing. But the corollary of that, the flip side of that, is it's actually never been harder to decide what you should do, because there are now so many options. So
Yeah.
what we do is we help people to go on one of those paths. But even when they're finished, even if they have a short list of 3 or 4, sometimes people still get, "Well, what do I do? What if I make the wrong choice?" Or how, and they get trapped in that target confusion. So the simple answer is, pick any of them. It doesn't actually matter right now. It doesn't matter. Pick one and do it for 6 months to 12 months. Because if you're here at this point and you're looking in 3 different directions, if you stay here, you're not going to get any more information. But if you pick one path and move down that path a little bit, your vistage is going to be different in 12 months. It might be, "Yeah, I could. That's interesting, but it's not what I thought. So I'm going to move backwards and sideways into another one." Or it could be, "Actually, yes, but maybe over to the left a little bit instead of on the right path, on the right hand side path," or whatever it is. So actually getting and doing is much more important.
So you're sort of taking away that element of fear, because I definitely know what you're talking about on that fear, because you're investing time and money and all these things, and what if it doesn't work out? And another thing is, if you've had a traumatic experience where there was a big change in your life, and it really affected you, and you did not handle it that well, like me, I've had that, then it makes you reluctant to want to choose a path out of fear that this is not the right path. So helping to build someone's confidence to say, you have the ability to change if things are not going the way that you want them to go. That's a huge thing, I think, for people. You're right. And that is what it comes down to. That's a hard one to overcome. And a lot of people don't have people. So it's good to have people in the world that is going to fight for you, that's going to say, "Look, you can do anything, and it's okay if it doesn't work out." So yeah, we need that for sure. It was beyond just being adaptable. What specific ways of thinking will help people thrive in jobs that don't yet exist? What do you think about that?
So I have a talk that I give in schools about the future of work, and what's the future of work. And I give an example of a slide with 10 different careers that are currently hiring in huge numbers, very successful people, from drone operators to telemedicine physicians to cybersecurity and influencers and things like this. All of these careers did not exist when these students in high school started junior school or primary school in Ireland. So there's no way that the current education system can be training people for those specific careers. But that's not the role of education. It is what education has become. But for me, the role of education is to teach people how to stick with something that is tough, how to learn, not this learn these dates and then be able to regurgitate them at an exam in a hall where you're writing them on a piece of paper and then never think about them again. It's how to learn, being curious. And that's really what people need, is to stay curious and to stay to continue the concept of continuous professional development, which is basically a way of saying, be curious and learn new stuff all the time, because there's always something every day. You can learn something new, small, big, by accident, through trauma, through really tough, hard situations. We can take an immense amount of learning. And if we can apply all of that, we can navigate. And we have the bravery. I mean, you said it a second ago, people who are down a path and they've gone down a wrong path. If people are going down a wrong path, they can see it and go, oh, maybe this is not for me, and they can move. The problem is when people go down the right path at that time in their lives, but then that is no longer the right path for them. That's where it takes an immense amount of bravery, and it takes an immense amount of courage to maybe take a step back to go on a different trajectory. That's where having somebody and finding a coach, finding a career guidance counselor, finding somebody who has the experience to be able to help you and guide you, even for a couple of sessions, just to help you to get your head in the right place to go, this is the direction for me. It's really, really important.
And what would be some of the early signs of burnout? Let's say they're in it, they're going, but something's starting to feel a little off. What are some early signs of burnout that would tell them, okay, maybe I should start looking for a mentor or looking for someone to help me figure this out?
Sunday evening sweats. When on a Sunday evening, when you're dreading the thought of going into work on Monday morning, when you have that sense of, okay, I've finished watching the Sunday evening movie or the news or whatever, and then you start to go, when you start to do that, I hear entrepreneurs talk about it all the time. When you don't jump out of bed wanting to go to work, that's time to sell your business. People, and look, I'm not being flippant. It's not that easy for somebody who's got bills to pay to go, no, I don't feel like going in, so I'm just going to throw everything in the air. But when you start to really feel burnt out, when you start to feel this is more than just I'm tired, this is I'm drained, and I'm the joy or the spark is being snuffed out of me at the moment. That's when it's time to start looking at options, to start seeing what other things that you can do, and going and finding plenty of places you can find career guidance counselors or mentors or coaches and things like that. There's plenty of places you can find them online for really reasonable rates now. That's when you should start having those conversations.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. As far as feelings go, I've always been aware of, my feelings and how things are going. And for me specifically, with the type of leadership skills and the way that I like to be involved, I can pay attention to that little feeling that's in the pit of my stomach. And when I start to go, I accepted this shift, but I really don't want to do this. And on my break, I'm like trying to get out of the building, and I realize like, okay, it's happening every time. And I think that means I'm not supposed to be doing this. Yeah, I'm hyper aware of that. Not everyone is. I've honestly been I envy people who could go to the same job every day for years. And if you ask them about it, they're sort of mediocre about it. They're like, oh, yeah, it's just a job. I just do it for money. And, I'm just like, but how do you feel about it? And that's the thing, is not everybody is like connected with their feelings that deep. So, I think just paying attention to your thoughts, even because some people who are not sensitive to their feelings, they're at least having the thought, right? There's at least some kind of thought coming in. And so being aware of what are you saying to yourself when you go into work? What are the thoughts you're saying on your way home? Yeah, and that's a big one, is paying attention to our thoughts and our feelings.
Absolutely. But the thing is, people are told, like, they get the well-meaning advice, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Well-meaning, but bad advice, because that leads people to think, I must be fulfilled in everything, in every second of the job, or I love playing soccer, so I must be a soccer star, or I love telling stories, so I must be a movie star. And that's because I love doing it. Actually, the core is there, but it's actually figuring out what are the intrinsic parts of a job or a career that are interesting to you that you can enjoy doing. So if you're spending most of your time enjoying your role more than the bits that are the humdrum, look, no job is perfect. Everybody's got to do taxes. Everybody's got to do some kind of monotony in their job. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But if you can find the bits that you're interested in, for example, we were working with a large retail distributor that had huge warehouses of picking and packing and putting stuff onto carts and shipping them out to different places in logistics. And they had a huge turnover of staff because they were looking for people who were in retail, and those people intrinsically want to be around people. So we switched up their recruitment process, and we found people and we targeted people who were process orientated, who wanted to be able to see a job, a small job done from start to finish, to be able to go, okay, I need to move, empty these boxes, to bring them onto this pallet, to bring them over these shelves, to line them up in this way that they're ready for people. And they can mentally just check off the stuff. They don't need to be interacting with loads of people. They don't need to be telling jokes, because they find intrinsic value in seeing the job done from start to finish. So understanding that there are different types of careers and different types of roles that are going to be appealing to a vast array of different people, and being able to find there's no such thing as a bad personality. We take out psychoses and we take out some of these other things that we have. There's no such thing as a bad personality. There's simply a bad fit for the role that you're in. I wrote a guide about a year and a half ago now called whyouhateyourjob.com. And it's the top reasons why people hate their job and what they can do about it. Because there's a lot of really common things about why people hate their jobs. But the number one thing that nobody actually talks about is that they're in the wrong job for them, because they have landed in this career path because of decisions made 20 years ago or 10 years ago, or advice or whatever. And it's just not the right thing for them, that if they move to something else, that they'll actually be able to get excited in the mornings and jump out of bed and go, can't wait to get to work.
Wow. And that's sort of like as a nurse, right? I enjoy meeting new people, and I enjoy helping people and figuring out
doing
that.
The paperwork?
I'm sorry?
Did you enjoy doing all the paperwork?
Right. And that's the thing is, well, I'm a little type A, so I like organization. But my thing is getting deeper with it of I like meeting new people, but what am I receiving back? Does it mean that it doesn't matter who comes my way? Or does it actually matter who comes my way? What do I want to be receiving from this? And niching it down to say, I like to talk. I like having conversations with people. And I would prefer to have someone approach me that has an interesting that we can have an interesting, deep conversation about. Right? Not just, you're always telling me that you're sick, and I'm always telling you that, there's no magic pill. It's like I realized, okay, some of these things, I understand why I thought this was good. I understood why I went this way, but getting deeper to it, so important to take note of, because no job is perfect. And when we tell people, find what you love to do and you'll be set, it sort of builds this thing inside of us, like we need to be happy at every moment, and that's not the truth. So like we spent 30 minutes trying to get our technical difficulties under control. That's not fun, but I asked myself, am I enjoying myself in this very moment? How do I feel talking to someone and asking them questions, and is that worth it? Is that above the technical difficulties? Yeah, it is. So, that's so important to point out, that there is no 100% happy all the time job.
There's not. But there's also something which I think is important. And you touched on it there when you were saying you went into nursing thinking this was what nursing was. And then there was other bits where you're going, actually, maybe it's not. That is also indicative of people not having a clear idea of what's actually involved in the role. So when we were testing out our software, for example, my wife is a secondary school teacher. She's a qualified primary school teacher. She's an acting secondary school teacher. And she did not get teacher as one of her careers. But the careers that she got were kind of similar to teaching, hospital play specialist, coach, this kind of stuff. And actually, when she read down through them, she was thinking, actually, I'd love to do that. That sounds really interesting. She's very happy in her job because she's found the areas within her school and within her curriculum that she really loves doing. She loves the people she's working with. She loves making an impact. But there are parts of teaching that she enjoys correcting homework? What kind of sociopath enjoys correcting homework? But there are teachers who are, because they see it as the intrinsic value of this is their understanding. The students are understanding. So there are people who are really engendered towards that way. But then there's other people who there are certain parts of it, or they have a romanticized version of the career. And that's when they start to get miserable and they start to get resentful. And that to me is, if you did our assessment, you might not have gotten nurse because of some of the other examples, some of the other questions that were asked through it. And it might be, actually the interactions and the patience, or the repetitiveness of saying to a patient, you're coughing because you're smoking, stop smoking. And then the next week they come back going,
Same
I
thing
don't know
every
why
day.
I'm coughing so much. So that would probably have come up and you might not have got it, but you might have got something else like coach or like chat show host or podcast host or something like that, because it's more about the communication and having that side of things. So that's another thing that I think is, if you're in a school where you have career guidance counselors, sometimes they just don't have the bandwidth to be able to stay up to date with what's actually involved in each of these careers, which is why our software does an awful lot of the heavy lifting. And then the coach and the career guidance counselor can really just spend time digging into the final list with the student or the individual or the client, and then really understanding, teasing out what it is that they want.
I wish I knew of you or had someone like you in my life. I had to experience many different settings before I could figure out what I actually really loved. Well, I was a float nurse for Top Research Hospital for 12 years. And the only reason that I lasted so long is because my manager and the doctors, they really liked me and I liked them, and they knew I could obtain information and I could use it. And it was because they gave me the freedom to float around. My nurse manager could tell that, Wanda's been doing this same place, working at this office for about a month now, and she's probably going to start reaching out for somewhere else to go. So they sort of started putting me in different situations, different clinics, different emergency rooms. And I loved that because, she knew me and was like, yeah, I can only stay here for so long and talk to a specific type of person for so long. And then I got to change it up. And so it did work out for quite a while. And I learned so many valuable skills. But when I decided to leave nursing was at the beginning of COVID. Well, it was actually right before COVID. It was almost as if I had a sixth sense about what was going to happen in the world. And so I ended up having the ability to take off work for a few months, and I started going into sales. And when you mentioned that not all jobs are forthcoming about what is actually the job, that's so true, especially in sales. So I encountered a sales position that I only lasted one day in, and that was because they had great energy, right? The music's blasting. Everybody's in a really great mood. We're all drinking energy drinks, and we're doing these bingos to get our mind going. And we're practicing conversations with each other as far as when you speak to someone and you're trying to sell them this is what you say and blah, blah, blah. And so we did all of that. And I'm like, I could do this. And I actually had done a little bit of sales before that in this particular job. And we get ready to go out. So I spent 2 days in their office, learning them, meeting them, getting the vibe, all that stuff, right? The third day is my first day out to scout. They had me in the middle of a busy town on the main street, and they wanted me to stop people. Okay. And the first thing I said, I observed, and they were like, you need to do what we're doing. And I looked at them and I said, that's not going to happen. I said, you, not once did anyone mention to me or even bring up that this is actually what you're doing. And I said, that's something that I'm not comfortable with. I'm sorry, and the girl was just like, and I said, look, you guys didn't go about this the right way. You trained me for 2 days and you never mentioned what the job actually is. And, I had to tell them that tip. And I said, young kids can come in out of high school or something and be okay with it. And it was like, I don't know what they were thinking. It's like, you're not going to keep people, first of all. And, there's a high turnover rate because you guys are not being 100% forthcoming. So I've experienced that, especially in sales. Sales is hard. I loved it. It taught me a lot about myself. It taught me about that part of me that likes to meet new people and that likes to talk. So I could be spending an hour talking to someone and realize that we're not talking about the thing anymore. We're talking about this and that. And so that's when I realized, okay, I want to interview people, but it took me, years really to understand exactly what it was. In my experience, when people say mentor, and I'm in the United States, I'm actually in the state of Tennessee, When we think of mentor, I have always assumed that you need to already know what you want to do and you need to already know what you want to be. And then you go and find a mentor that has done that thing. I think that's important to say because, for you, me meeting you is bringing the awareness that, it's not just about having someone that's done all of these successes, but it's also about in the very beginning before you know what you want to do, right? And that is a concept to me that in my area, I've never heard anybody speak about that. It's always, you got to figure yourself out. You got to know what you want to do and then find you a mentor. And I'm happy to break that mold and to bring this awareness to people. Another question, we have two more questions I would like to ask. So one of them is, instead of just avoiding problems, what are some positive habits that family businesses can start early for smooth leadership changes?
So the biggest thing that I see that is an impediment to smooth succession planning is actually the current generation not able to let go. And there's a couple of reasons for this. So the most common one, though, the biggest one, is that a current generation business owner will very often have their identity, their self-identity, wrapped up in, I am the CEO of this business, or I am the patriarch or the matriarch of this business. So they find it really difficult to then not be that thing, because then if they're not that, then what are they? Because they've had that as their core identity for decades. So what I talk about with current generation people is, are you familiar with the hero's journey? The concept of the hero's journey? So the hero's journey is basically the oldest storytelling technique in the world. It's been used since the ancient Greeks right up to Harry Potter, all of these, every story. It's where the hero starts in this world. Then they have a couple of different steps, and then they're called to adventure, and then they're called to the special world. They're called to adventure. And within that world of adventure, that's when they have the trials and tribulations. That's where they learn. That's where they grow and develop. But then the end of the story is that the hero, comes back from the special world, back to the real world, a changed and better person. And for me, entrepreneurship is that special world, and entrepreneurship in family business circles, that is that special world. And amazingly, in the hero's journey, right before people go on their hero's journey, they have a guide or a mentor or a MacGuffin or a something. So if you think of Harry Potter, they had Dumbledore. If you think of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker had Yoda. If you think of The Matrix, you've got Morpheus. So with those three examples, I've outed myself as a bit of a nerd and a bit of a geek, because they're all star sci-fi references. But all of these stories, before the hero goes on that journey, they meet a mentor, somebody who helps prepare them for the special world. So what I like to do is I try to work with current generation business owners, and I said, okay, you're at the end of your hero's journey. So what I need you to do is to come back to the real world, and I need you to go from hero of your story to mentor of the next generation's story. And that's how we can keep that cycle going. So the biggest thing that I would urge current generation people to think about is how they can go from hero to mentor and be able to keep that cycle going.
I love that. I sort of forgot about there's a saying that if you can teach it, then you know you've mastered it, right? My next question is, besides adapting leadership styles, how do you see the leader's role changing in the next 5 to 10 years with more remote jobs and tech?
So the leader's role, I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier on. I think having more emotional intelligence, having more of a person-to-person connection. There is something that is, I'm a big fan of hybrid work. I'm a big fan of giving people the opportunity to be able to live their life and do what they want to do, so long as we're working together towards the same goals. But I do think that there is a little bit of spark, a little bit of magic that is lost in those serendipitous, you're both in the canteen grabbing a coffee at the same time, or walking to the elevator at the end of a session and just having that couple of minutes of banter and chit chat. I think there's some things that are missing in that. So being able to communicate and being able to connect with people through digital devices across time zones, I think that's going to be a really important skill that leaders are going to need to develop.
So, like we're doing now. I suppose that means everybody should know how to do what we're doing as far as with setting up the camera, doing the lighting, making sure the sound is good. Sounds like there's a pretty promising career in that to help people to learn how to get set up.
There
Because
is, but I think it's more than just setting up the lights and the camera. It is how to ask the questions. And when, like, if I'm sitting across from you and I see your knee is bouncing a little bit because you're a bit nervous about questions that we're going into an area where we're touching on a topic that you're a bit kind of nervous about, I can see that. Or you're fidgeting, or you're tapping your fingers or something, or you have some kind of something that's happening below this part of the screen. I'm bouncing my knee on purpose now and I'm tapping my fingers, but you can't tell any of that.
Yeah.
I'm talking. So being able to pick up on either inflection or understanding the normal cadence of somebody and how they're speaking, I think that kind of empathetic teaching and empathetic development is going to be far more important than what your webcam is like, what your mic is like. It's that person to person connection. Yes, it's important. And if you have a fuzzy picture or you're using some kind of a weird cat filter or something like that, it's going to deter from it and diminish the experience. But actually, it's the person to person thing, whether you have good lighting or not.
Yeah, yeah. This reminds me of a theory that I randomly thought of, and it was at the beginning of COVID. And I started just thinking, I'm a deep thinker, can you tell? I started thinking, I went to the doctor's office and I realized that all of these babies that are born, that are growing up, they're only seeing my eyes. I'm sitting here, I'm a stranger. And and it comes in the way of survival because we all learn those skills about judging someone when they first meet them, because you need to know, is this person friendly? Is this person not friendly? One of the things that we do is we immediately stare at someone's face and we look at their eyes and we look at their mouth. And if they're smiling, it's like, okay, this person's smiling, right? They're aware that I'm here. They're acknowledging me. But I suddenly became aware that these babies were growing up in a world where they couldn't see people's faces. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that would make the next generation more sensitive to vibrations or energy. You're going to need to pull a lot on their audio even, right? It's like, if I can't see whether you're smiling, I'm going to listen to your tone, right? I'm going to try to use all of my senses to figure out what's safe, what this person's about, where they have to use more of their emotional intelligence. How does this person make me feel versus what they look like? I thought that was very interesting, to think about that.
I hear this all the time when I talk with teachers or I talk with employers, and they give out about was millennials, now it's Gen Zs and everything else. And they go, I worry about the next generation. I've always been a huge optimist. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who calls himself a stubborn optimist, and I like that. I've had the pleasure of working with young people for a long time, between running summer camps, helping run the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards. And yeah, there's hiccups, but there has always been thus. When we were growing up, when we were joining the workforce, we weren't angels. We had our own problems, and the different generations had issues with us. But from my experience dealing with young people, and I have lots of young people in my world now, my two daughters are late teens, the future is going to be absolutely fine. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be different things that people will have to deal with that perhaps we didn't have to deal with. But people are pretty awesome, and we'll figure it out.
They're resilient. Yeah, for sure. Well, I hope you're right on this. I hope, I'm curious. I am curious to see what's going to unfold in the next decade. But okay, so we have the last question. Beyond just future success, what happens to society if we don't properly mentor and empower the next generation of leaders?
If we don't properly do it, if society doesn't invest in the next generation at any point in history, the next generation is worse off and things start to go downhill. So our job really, there's a great phrase, Arthur Guinness, the founder of Guinness, you've heard of the brand Guinness, the Irish black beer. So when he started, he had 5 pillars but the 5 pillars of what we're doing. And one of the pillars that I has always stuck with me, and I think is the most important thing, to think in terms of generations yet to come. So when he was building his business, he wasn't thinking about quarterly targets or annual targets or year ends or weekly things or KPIs or any of this. He was thinking about what are the decisions that I'm making that are going to impact people that I will never meet. They are the great grandkids of the generations. And he had such a dramatic impact on society in Ireland. The introduction of so many things that are still to this day impacting Irish society in a positive way. So I think it has always been like that, that if it's our job to not be looking at this quarter, and look, farming, and we've thought in quarters and seasons and years and cycles and all the rest of it. But really, when we're thinking about succession planning, it's not just in a family business, it's societal. We have to be thinking about what's coming next. So we have to be spending a bit of time investing, even if we're not going to either suffer it or get the benefit of it. The great phrase is society gets better when people plant trees under whose shade they will never sit.
Wow. It's been a while since I've heard that. The digital world is forever, essentially. I mean, this interview here could go on for generations to be seen. And thinking about what people from the future will need and putting out that information. Wow. Thank you so much for telling us some tips and tricks on how we can, be successful in life and when to find a mentor, which obviously is before you have it figured out. Mentors are not just for after, okay? We're all changing all the time. So basically, just find a mentor. Also, I wanted to ask, you mentioned a how to know if you don't love your job, and it's a questionnaire or it's a book. Is that something that is a free material that someone can find?
Yeah. So whyouhateyourjob.com has
Okay.
all of that stuff there for free. There's no downloads. It's just there. YouTube and StephenShortt.com has links to everything.
I will post those in the interview below so everyone's able to see that.
The website has everything. StephenShortt.com has everything from my LinkedIn to just a form to contact me directly. Instagram, YouTube, I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I will provide all of the resources for our audience. And to our audience, thank you so much for listening, for your time and energy. Thank you so much, Stephen.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It was fun.